My apologies. I was speaking and I didn't realize I was on mute. Good evening, everyone. I am Lisha Dore, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to One on One, where we bring to you some of the best minds in Trinidad and Tobago. Tonight's episode is Let's Talk National Security, and we do have our panelists on with us. I'm not seeing him on video, but he's here with us, Mr. Paul Daniel Nahous. There he is. So Trinidad and Tobago, as we should know, is currently under a state of emergency, which was declared on March the 3rd, 2026. And this was in response to a surge in violent crime, which included gang activity, shootings, threats against law enforcement. The measures have been extended for 3 months, giving authorities expanded powers, and this would include warrantless arrests and broader search capability. But the bigger picture is this is not just a short-term spike. The country has spent much of the past year under a state of emergency. So this tells us that the crime problem is more deeper and more sustained. So far for the year, if my stats are correct, maybe my panelists here can give me further information. We've had more than 60 murders already recorded for this year. And many of these murders, as expected, would have been linked to gangs, illegal firearms, drug trafficking, and so on. Now, in response, we've had security operations being intensified. We are seeing more arrests, we're seeing more weapons being seized, and we're seeing some early signs that the crime is now starting to slow. Beyond this state of emergency, we also see a shift happening with national security, where the government is restructuring the national security system. And we are using a lot more intelligence-led policing, technology. If you've heard the Minister of Homeland Security and the Prime Minister speak, they reference the use of modern technology. And also there's a greater emphasis on stronger border protection. Now, although this is something we've been speaking about, border protection, protecting the borders, we have to recognize that under this new government, there is a much stronger and more aggressive push to secure our borders. We are also seeing far more increased collaboration with international partners to tackle crime that is taking place in the regional and international sphere. And that brings us to a major recent development, which we will go into with our panelists tonight. And that is where Prime Minister, the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, she was among just 2 CARICOM leaders invited to attend the Shield of America Summit in Florida, which took place earlier this month. And that meeting would have focused on fighting drug trafficking, illegal arms, and transnational crime. And those 3 things that I just mentioned would be key drivers of the crime and violence that we see happening in Trinidad and Tobago. So coming out of that summit, Trinidad and Tobago is now part of a regional coalition. And that coalition is supposed to allow for real-time intelligence and coordinated action. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we are here to unpack and break down tonight, what these measures mean, and whether they could truly reduce crime in Trinidad and Tobago. Joining us for this very critical conversation is security expert Alderman Paul Daniel Nahous. Now, Paul, it only dawned on us when we were doing the flyer that you are indeed an alderman, and we want to say congratulations to you on that, on being appointed as an alderman. Right? You're joining us for the very first time here on our platform, and I want to say welcome on behalf of our team, the viewers that are joining us here tonight. You know, we're absolutely thrilled to have someone with your expertise on our platform. And on that note, I have to hail out your amazing wife, Candace. Very lovely person. I had the pleasure of meeting her. we do share our alma mater together. So I mean, it would not be right of me not to say hello to Candice. I'm not sure if she's live with us, either on the Zoom or social media, but Candice, if you're here, my dear, hello to you, and you're a wonderful person. I follow your work. Please continue doing the amazing work you're doing. So as always, we aim to make the session as interactive as possible. I want to encourage the viewers to participate. I say every week, what differentiates us from most of the discussions like this is that they tend to be one way. We are two-way. So we put you in touch directly with the panelists where you could raise your concerns and ask your questions. So please feel free to raise your hand if you want to make a contribution, ask a question, and as usual, use the charts. So without further ado, I want to now pass you on to my very capable co-moderator, Mr. Donnie Rogers. He will give his opening remarks and start off our discussion tonight.
Good night, Lisha. Good night, Paul. Thank you for accepting the invite to this evening. And as we did earlier, we have to apologize. We were supposed to have you on much earlier, a couple of weeks ago. But, doing this kind of things, how it is go, sometimes something pop up and we have to, make some changes. So we really appreciate you being here. As Lisha said, this is the first time that you're on this program. And, the reason why we looked at Paul today is because throughout this entire thing, from the Summit of Americas, when Trinidad and Tobago and the Honorable Prime Minister would have signed an agreement with the US President and 11 other heads of state, regional heads of state, there was noise all over the place, to and from. And I think from our opinion, Paul was the one person who was steadfast, and he didn't really put out any noise, if I could put it like that, right? And I think he would be a very neutral person to have this discussion with. And this is what the program is about. It's not about the bacchanal and things like that. It's about getting into the facts and the meat of the matter to flesh out these issues in a way in which listeners and the average person could get the true appreciation for what is going on. So that is why we have Paul here today, and we are very lucky to have him. Again, Paul, thank you for accepting the invite. And we'll start off with some opening remarks from you, Paul. We have some questions for you. And after your opening remarks, we'll get into the question. So over to you, Paul.
All right, guys. First of all, thank you so much for having me, for the lovely introduction. Very glad to be here. First time here. Hopefully will not be the last. But thanks again. And in terms of when you mentioned me not making noise with this, there's a lot of noise that goes on. And I like that term noise with matters, with different matters. Matters of importance. And a lot of people have their opinions on this, as they should. However, while we all have certain political slants here and there, where I draw the line with it is where it comes to my professional input. So with this in particular, I would have waited to see, all right, what was said, what the facts were, because I had to switch now from politically analyzing something into doing it at a professional mode. And that is where I become very factual with and very blunt in a lot of ways with my opinions on it.
Good. And that is what we appreciate. Generally, this is the type of discussion we have. And let me just clarify the use of the word noise. To anybody who had studied communication, noise is a barrier to communication, right? So it's not noise with the rah. It's the technical term for noise in terms of communication, right? So I would like to start off this agreement that Trinidad and Tobago would have signed with the United States and 11 other regional leaders. One of the concerns that we have heard from various quarters, and I think you could shed some light on this, is that what does this mean as it relates to sovereignty? We'd like to get your input on that.
Well, bluntly, nothing. It means nothing in terms of affecting our sovereignty, because this is not us handing over command of anything. This is not us handing over any authority on anything really to the US or to any of the other partners. This is us cooperating and having a collective effort towards the same goal is not the same as surrendering command. So it does not affect our sovereignty in any way.
I'm
I
glad you
love,
described it like that.
I
Yeah.
love your response. I mean, that to me is such a
Hmm.
clear response. And I hope our viewers are taking this in, he explained that very, very, very well. It could not have been said in a clear way. We'll continue.
So, okay, so we are very clear on that. Is this now, can this be described as either a military or a law enforcement issue?
It's a bit of both, actually, because you see where we are situated and what is going on around us. You have a mix of both. So you have the military side of it, where we have the Coast Guard and we have whatever support we have from the US and again other partners in, we say police in the waters, but really when you're talking about being out there in the waters, you're talking about military. You talk that
Yeah.
type of border patrol falls into the realm of military more than law enforcement. But then when you get them on the shore and when you get people internally, domestically, then you're dealing really with the law enforcement aspect. Now, it is a relationship between both, and both cannot operate in silos. Otherwise, we're really not
Hmm.
getting anywhere fast. So it is partly a military operation and initiative, and partly law enforcement. So it is a mix of both.
Right, right. Now, I will touch on something here. Trinidad and Tobago was one of two CARICOM members, if I'm correct. It was Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana. What do you think this says to the rest of CARICOM?
It could say many things and maybe get into political territory, but I
Hmm.
think I'll stray a little bit away from the political territory and say in terms of security, they
Yeah.
they felt, in their opinion, I guess, that Trinidad and Guyana were the best situated in terms of policy and in terms of seriousness in dealing with this, enough
Hmm.
so that they would want to work with us, and they know that we'd want to accept that kind of cooperation with partners to that interest. And realistically as well, while it affects other parts of the Caribbean, Trinidad and Guyana are probably the most affected in regards to the
Agreed.
fallout from this narco trade.
Right. Also, I think that Trinidad and Guyana would be the closest countries to South America where this issue stem from. So in that regard, I think, from a geographic standpoint, it also says that it recognized that both Trinidad and Guyana, the two countries, as you said, who would feel the impact the most, coming from the narco trade and the trade of illegal firearms. Um, so, and I just took some notes with some questions here, so just excuse me. Yeah?
Yeah, go ahead.
How can this treaty help with the narcotics and the illegal firearms? How do you
All
see
right.
this helping with regards to that?
So the thing is, what you need to understand, first of all, is that the narco trade, the illegal firearm trade, all of that, it's a business. And yeah, we could go around and say, yeah, it's a business. Everyone knows it's a business to make money. But what does that mean? That means there's supply chain. It is supply chain. It is people will make the products or obtain the product somehow. They will transport it, conceal it, smuggle it. They have to store the products, then they have to distribute the products. So it's an entire supply chain of that. And this is an attempt to break the supply chain at some point of it. Now, doing that maybe in the mainland in South America, where the products are being compiled, being obtained, probably because of domestic issues or so, or geographical issues or whatever issues. We can't break the supply chain there. The US probably can't break the supply chain there either. However, that crucial point where it comes to the smuggling and transportation, that is a point that we have identified. It's an interdiction point where you can break it. And what it means is that we are going to get a lot of real-time intelligence and more so capability, capacity, because there's a reality that we have to face. Our resources are finite. Where we are located,
Mhm.
the amount of vessels, the amount of crafts that come in and out of Trinidad and Tobago, due to trade, due to fishing, due to all kind of reasons, there are crafts and vessels coming in and out of the island, and our resources are very finite. And we need assistance in terms of detection, in terms of interdiction, in terms of even assistance with investigations and all. All these things are things outside of our capabilities to make a real dent, a real impact. And now being part of this treaty with those other nations, we are now going to expand our capacity and be able to get the assistance we need to target what we need to target.
Now, one of the reasons why I asked that question is because before the program started, I was just doing some research with regional news and stuff like that. And I saw today that Mexican authorities would have interdicted or intercepted a narco submarine, and the authorities would have escorted it to, whatever military base they would, have it in. So I think, what we may see is actually a shift in some of the trafficking routes because emphasis is being placed, on one area. But also, I mean, President Trump did speak about Mexico as being one of the avenues. And this find today, or, whenever it was, I think it speaks to, maybe a shift in some of the routes, and now they will have to go through some little teething issues because some of these routes are very well secure, if I could use that word, and now you are finding an erosion of that. So I think as it relates to that, we will see we can see some fines or some of these vessels that are used actually being discovered now, which will be, it would provide a bigger hit now, for these guys who are actually transshipping, via these means. So now, if we could go back to our regional partners now in CARICOM, obviously, if we are the persons, well, Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, who would be most affected, we all know that things are sent up the islands, right? What does this mean now as it relates to, from a security standpoint, what does it mean as it relates to regional cooperation with this matter? And how does this also benefit our regional partners up the islands and stuff like that?
So I want to touch on the first point there, which you made, saying that you believe that they may be diverting where they're sending the drugs, and that is 100% true because I'm going back to it as a business model.
Yeah.
If their boats are being blown up in our waters, if their people are being caught, every time a ship is hit, if we take out that ship, you are denying them labor, which I mean they have an abundance of labor, but
Yeah.
more so you're denying them the vessel. Okay, maybe they have more vessels. Then you're hitting their product, which is very expensive. The costs start to add up, and at some point, it becomes a risk assessment, just like with a business, a risk assessment. Hey, this route is costing us, if not more than it's making us. The profit just isn't there to keep us interested. So they would
Yeah.
find another route, might have teething problems, but the drug trade is not going to stop because of this. They're going to redirect. And my opinion is very simple and very plain. Once it doesn't come through by us, I'm not really concerned. I don't want to make it sound bad or selfish, but that's other people's problem. I'm looking
Yeah.
at my country and what's going on here. We can't not address it because we're worried about it going somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Now, in terms of it going up the islands, it is a lot more difficult for them because you're dealing just with the sea. It's a lot more difficult to get it to other islands. Not saying it's not possible, but it's a lot more difficult. It's a lot more costly. Trinidad is a nice launching pad for them to jump on, then jump out and
Yeah.
start to ship out from. It's easy. We have the routes. We geographically we're positioned well for them. That is our blessing on our cruising trade. So in terms of it being redirected, yes, I believe it's been redirected. Maybe it has cut into their profits, most certainly cut their profits. There's some police intel showing that the price of marijuana and the price of cocaine in some cases has doubled and quadrupled, meaning shortage of supply, higher risk.
Yeah.
It's becoming a major deterrent now for people trying to ship drugs through our country.
Right. Now, we don't really know what is the what are our partners' feelings about this with regards, and when I say partners, I mean, um, CARICOM governments and CARICOM islands. But how do you see this? Because so far it's really Trinidad and Guyana have signed on to this. We were the only ones invited. But how do you see this treaty actually creating value for the rest of CARICOM?
Well, it creates value in the sense that it's so easy to go from Trinidad to another island in terms of getting us using us as a transshipment point. So it helps to protect them. It really helps to protect them, and they will feel in between or would have felt more. Yeah, a little bit of gang violence, some gang violence, some illegal weapon trade, but it's really such a minute amount compared to Trinidad, Tobago, and Guyana and what we are experiencing. I like to say that a lot of the CARICOM countries and leaders, they have the luxury of being able to take a political stance against something that they feel personally about. It's easy to make that stance if it does not affect them in a big way, because it doesn't affect them like it affects Trinidad and Tobago. Narco ships running freely in and out of Trinidad and Tobago affects us so much more than it affects any other island. So, I mean, I commend the Prime Minister for the stance she took, that she realized she had to make a hard stance on this, and she had to actually side with people who had our best security interests in mind. So, in terms of talking about, you don't support this president, you don't support his policy or his personality or whatever it is. It is not a politics and a personality thing. It is a security issue. And I think a lot of the nations that were not on board with the US with this, they were like that because they had the luxury of being like that. They had the luxury of using personality and their personal feelings, instead of looking hard at, hey, this is a security issue, this is security policy. So I know our Prime Minister is in support of the US Prime Minister. And whether she was or wasn't, it wouldn't matter because she took a stance on security. So she's in
Yeah,
support
yeah.
of him, but it wouldn't matter whether she was in support or not. She took a stance on security. This is a security issue. The US has been the first partner to offer us this type of help probably ever, in terms of the impact of it, in terms of what they're willing to offer.
Mhm.
And realistically, they're doing it to secure their country as well from the narco trade and assist. And they have taken a stance where, hey, if Trinidad is in line with Guyana, is in line with the US, the rest of the countries in the coalition, that, hey, we can actually make such a huge dent together in this narco trade. Everyone can bring the resources they have. US can bring their military, their equipment, their intelligence resources. We have our geographical position. Everybody could win in this scenario by helping to curtail and even cripple the drug trade.
I agree, and I think Trinidad and Guyana, as you said, is like, we are the full stop, for things to go, a little bit, more up the islands. Last year, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, St. Lucia was kind of alarmed with their murder rate because it was about
Yeah.
8 or 12 or something like that. Now that may sound like a little bit for us, but for them it was very high. But even when you look at it per capita, they still have a significantly lower murder rate. And a couple months into this year, you would have heard there was a kinetic strike, that involved some, St. Lucians and stuff like that. And that basically says that the drug trade is not just affecting Trinidad and Guyana and environs, but is actually, higher up the islands as well. And it is contributing to rise in crime rates. So we honestly cannot discount that fact. I think the statistics and the findings on the platforms are there, right? Um, so let me just
Well, if I could jump in right now, I want to
sure.
address some of the criticisms that the Prime Minister has had to face because of her involvement with the US and the Shield of the Americas summit, right? Now, one of the main criticisms is the concerns about sovereignty. And Paul, I
Mhm.
have to say, I could not have said what you said better, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And you know, the question we have to really ask is, are we strengthening security or are we giving up control? Right? And I think it was very clear from Mr. Nahous's answer that we are not giving up control. This has nothing to do with sovereignty. This is about strengthening security. Right? Now, I know critics will tell you, critics, so many critics, you know, we have a lot of critics in Trinidad, but people don't come forth with solutions, right? Everybody is a critic. That, you know, one of the concerns that critics have too is that we are giving foreign powers, the United States of America, too much influence over national security decisions. Paul, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, well, so ultimately, our prime minister is in charge. He's the head of the National Security Council. We have a minister of defense. We have a minister of Homeland Security. Last I checked, those portfolios they were not taken and put under any secretary of the US. Last I
Mhm.
checked, they still had full control of their ministries and their portfolios. I don't know if that's changed, but that's last time I checked, it was like that.
Oh
So,
God,
and
boy, I go vote for you, run for something. I go vote for you. I
that's
find
all
you
right.
explaining this
I got in
thing
my feet.
so clearly.
Mhm.
You know, you're really
Lisha,
explaining this clearly.
that
Yeah.
is why we have people like Paul and all our other guests who come on this program to break it down in a factual and simplistic way where the average Joe could have a positive takeaway as to what this thing really means and how it impacts people. You know,
Mm.
so again, you're seeing our approach to this program is actually working and it impressing us as well, at the same time.
Yeah, no, but I mean, you see, this is it. I think, I don't know. I don't know. We need people to be able to explain things in a way that the Joe public will understand. Now, guys, if you're not understanding what Paul's saying, well, then I don't know because I find he's explaining things so clearly, right?
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Another thing that critics will say, right, is we're damaging the reputation that we have with CARICOM and Latin America because of our relationship with the United States of America. So, I mean, Paul, I will ask you what your thoughts are on that.
I would respond and say this. You think we're damaging our relationships. What has the narco trade in the last 50 years done to our country? Look at the state of our country. We were at a point, I think, third or fourth in the world in the murder rate. Look at
Mm-hmm.
the amount of illegal guns. Look at the gangs. Look at the drugs. Look at the fallout. You want to talk about damaging relationships? Look what it has done to our people, damaged us socially, damaged us mentally. That it is all but destroyed the country. The
Mm-hmm.
country is
Yeah.
the government is holding on to the country and has now finally engaged some support that could actually bring us out of this now. And people want to talk about damaging relationships. I mean, I understand the diplomacy. I am quite obviously not a diplomat. I'm quite obviously not an international relations expert or person. But I mean, while you have to mend and keep your relationship with your neighbors good, while you have to try to, I don't want to say pacify, but try to meet where you can with them, they have to meet us where they could meet us, in that they have to recognize that we are being affected like this. And I think it's their damaging relationship with us by not understanding the plight we're in.
Exactly. Exactly. I was actually going to say that no member of CARICOM has ever come out and empathize with what Trinidad or Guyana has been going through with regards to the proliferation of drugs and illegal firearms. We have been battling this storm alone. There has never been a collected effort aimed at reducing the negative effects or the fallout from this issue that we have been facing. As a matter of fact, in the last 10 years, our murder rate has been steadily increasing, right? That has dramatically dropped over the last year, with the SOE, and two, with the involvement of the US here. When we look at the kinetic strikes, when you look at the involvement here, when you look at the radar, and combined with the SOE, last year we had the lowest figures ever in the murder rate. You know, just recently, and um, when the radar was here, there was a drug bust of $190 million in the Caroni Swamp. Before that, I think there was a newspaper report where police couldn't even get into there because of how intricate it was and the water, and all the channels and those sorts of things. But now, with the assistance of the US radar that was here, we say $190 million drug bust. I mean, we don't usually get these things. Sad to say that. It's very disappointing to say that. Thank God it happened. So we are seeing results. And I think at some point in time, we need to put country first. It doesn't say that we are disrespecting CARICOM. It doesn't say that we are sidelining anybody. But I think in order to be, now we are the largest trading partner in CARICOM. In order to offer that sort of support to the rest of CARICOM, we need to make sure that we are okay. That is what it boils down to.
I will say this,
And I think for too long we've been suffering.
I'd say that there was, the US was very serious about weeding out and stopping this trade, this illicit trade coming through. They were very serious about it. And, the Prime Minister was told to tell the US to leave. Now, if she was not in support, do you think the US would have left? They would have just hurt our relations with the US. That's all it would have done. And you know what? She could tell them very well to leave when CARICOM sends down our aircraft carrier, when CARICOM sends down boats to patrol and be able to stop drugs coming in. When CARICOM sends their fleet to assist Trinidad and Tobago, maybe then we'll consider a CARICOM only approach.
I fully agree with that, and we have never been on the receiving end of any assistance with CARICOM. As a matter of fact, and sorry to put it like this, the only time CARICOM got involved with his assets was with this Brent Thomas issue, and that's the most notable. That's the most notable thing CARICOM ever did, and look where that went, right? And for what use, right? So I agree with what you're saying there.
No, you were talking about a CARICOM only approach to fighting crime. Wasn't there a big conference, the CARICOM conference on crime?
There's always a CARICOM conference. There's always a talk show.
Under the last government, costing this country how much? Hundreds of millions of dollars. What came out of it?
Always a talk show, always. Nothing comes out, it's always a talk show.
Let me tell you what came out of it, ladies and gentlemen, crime went up. After that, we got the highest murder rates in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. So when people talking about a CARICOM only and a CARICOM approach to solving crime, really? Come on, really?
I think a lot of this comes, and I'll repeat this, it comes from the luxury of not having the level of fallout with the drug trade, with the narco trade that we have had. They don't, a lot of them don't know what it's like to be in a country like Trinidad and Tobago with this type of crime.
Correct. Now, I'd like to ask another question here. The treaty that was signed, I think all listeners would like to know from the operational perspective, what are the issues, although we kind of discuss things in general, what are the specific operational issues this treaty is attempting to solve? And we are asking that after everything we have said, just because of your way of putting it simply and for being concise.
No problem. Operation. First of all, you'll have to what we'll need to deal with this, and what we will be getting, and we have been getting already, is intelligence sharing. So being able to get that intelligence in time to act, from intelligence to action, we are not as well equipped as some of the bigger countries with that. And having that intelligence sharing is incredibly important. Now, coming from intelligence sharing to the operational aspect, do we have enough assets to be able to stop anything coming in and out, and to be able to launch where these narco terrorists are basically coming in and out? They have certain types of equipment, they have a certain volume of, if you want to say, vessels or personnel. We will never know the extent of exactly what they have, but we'll be prepared in case, because that capacity we have to operate will be expanded exponentially with, for example, just US Southern Command.
Yes.
So we went from intelligence sharing to operations. And then the other part of it now, in terms of our law enforcement assistance, in terms of being able to get the assistance with in training with investigation, training even with prosecution if need be, but training with investigation. The DA has actually been in Trinidad since I could ever remember, helping Trinidad and Tobago in terms of training the TTPS with the drug trade and new trends and all that. We have actually new drugs in Trinidad and Tobago that are being smuggled in and out, drugs that are flooding the US. And some of our officers may not be able to identify it, know exactly what they're dealing with or so. So we're able to get that assistance in our law enforcement administration and training as well. So we're going from intelligence to operational capability to all of the support capability.
Okay,
Do
guys,
you
I
go
just
on?
doing a
Go on,
time
sorry.
check. Believe it or not, it's 8:40. I don't know where the time went. So we will continue with the panel discussion, asking our questions and so on. But I want to take the opportunity to invite the members of the audience. If you do have a question you'd like to ask Paul or just a comment you want to make, feel free to raise your hand and use the chats as well. Right? We normally finish at about 9:30, so we have some time left. But it would be good to hear from you, and we're anxious to hear your thoughts, get input from you, members of the audience. Right. Sorry, go ahead, Donnie.
Okay. So when we talk about US Southern Command, do you think that the announcement by the US where they are investing 500 million into embassy compound, do you think that that holds the possibility for further collaboration as it relates to this treaty? Because I mean,
There's
I'll
no
be
way in
honest, 500 million is a lot of money to spend. There must be something in there that um, that may benefit us from a security point, from a security perspective. Do you think that there would be some benefits in there?
First of all, for an investment like that the US is making, it is a short, tangible show of support for Trinidad and Tobago and of the relationship that we have with the US. They're not going to spend that unless they are showing us we want further relations with you. That is going to cement it even further. And I think it is a really good thing that that has happened. And they're going to they have a quite large compound to set up what they want to set up on. We won't know exactly what they're setting up there in terms of
Yeah.
housing, in terms of whatever. However, they're going to be expanding staff, I'm sure. Their capabilities here. They will, I don't know what else they're building on the compound in terms of to assist us with kind of training or whatever, but they've used our police academy to assist us. They've come to us. I don't know if they'll want us to come to them for certain things now. However, it is a very good sign. It's a very good sign that they're willing to help us in a long-term relationship because you don't put out that money to purchase
Correct.
the land,
Yeah.
to build that kind of structure. You don't put out unless you want a permanent relationship with us or something as permanent as possible. It's a
Yeah,
good
as you
sign.
said, 500 million
Shows
is not a little bit of money, you know?
correct. It shows good cooperation too between our government and their government, and hopefully we have expanded security capabilities from that compound as well. And I wouldn't go on that, but I'm hoping for that as well.
Yeah. I agree. Um, Now we're talking about, the various things that could happen. And you would be the best person to answer this question. From a technical perspective, what would success look like? And what would be the specific KPIs, if you could call it KPIs, but what would be the indicators of success for this treaty?
Well, one aspect is that you would see, while this is not to address, this treaty is not to address domestic crime. I'll see that plain. This is to address, the transshipment points to deal with these international cartels. However, it will affect local crime, as in domestic crime will be reduced because if you have people with less access to illegal weapons, with less assets in terms of whatever is provided, they'll have less money, they'll be able to purchase less vehicles, they'll be able to they won't have as sophisticated a means of technology. Once you could deny them that, you're denying assets. That's a very important thing. Denying them assets, denying them those strongholds. It's going to make crime unprofitable or less profitable. It's going to become more difficult to be a criminal or to perpetrate certain crimes. And when that becomes more difficult, once our law enforcement is in tune with that, once they're in sync with what's going on there, they're going to be able to put a bigger dent in the gang activity. They're going to, because the gang members are not coming out for fun. They are coming out,
Mhm.
and yes, social displacement is an important part, very important part of gang recruitment and so. But they're doing it for money, for fast life, for money in their hand quick. If that starts to dry up, you're going to see a lot less crime or certain types of crime happening. And that is a good indicator. And I mean, I talk about like a smaller metric in that, and which should lead to that anyway. For example, the price of drugs going up. And the thing is, the price of drugs going up does not mean someone's making a bigger profit. It means that they have to pay more for it to come over. Again, going
Yeah.
to the business model of it. So that is one aspect. Another is that success looks like this as well. Once the government starts to put systems in place, when you see new systems developing, and those new systems are having an impact on the crime, those things could be solidified, and those are the models we need to start using. So success really looks like a reduction in crime. Success looks like systems that are actually working, being put in place and being built on.
Right. Well, I saw the commissioner a couple of days ago come out and said that there has been, reductions in crime comparative to, previous periods. So that is a plus as well. We're starting off on the right foot.
All right, if I may
Alicia,
jump
any
in.
question?
Yeah, I want to jump in. I want to
Right.
turn the attention now to the state of emergency, if I may, right? And I also want to remind the audience that if you do want to ask a question, make a contribution, please raise your hand because we want to hear from you. Right now, state of emergency, again, something that has been highly criticized, but it does work. The murder rate cut by half last year. It does
Mhm.
work, right? Paul, as a security expert, I would like to get your feedback. Do you see the state of emergency as an effective tool in reducing crime?
So understand a state of emergency is not a long-term crime fighting method. It
Mm-hmm.
is not. Let's start with that. What
Mm-hmm.
it is a specific tool. It is a specialized tool. And the way it needs to be used is like this. If you're using a state of emergency, it needs to be used to break the backs of the gangs and to do so quickly. Or also, and I'm not discounting this at all, this is important. And we see we don't have the information the National Security Council has. We don't have the information the Commissioner and the
Mhm.
Minister have. If there is a very serious threat to national security, then it may be required. A lot of preventive detention orders have been issued. We don't know what role those figures have played in term or are playing in terms of besides the narco trade in what they're looking to do or what they were looking to do. However, if you notice, they were able to pinpoint certain people and detain them. The special branch of the TTPS has information straight through about certain individuals, but intel is not evidence. So people will say, well, why can't I just pick them up? You have the information. Intel is not evidence. Once you grab somebody, you have to know you'll be able to prosecute them. And if you can't prosecute them, you have to know that when you grab them, you've alerted them to them being on the radar, and you might turn around and in the figure from the interrogation, hey, they have somebody tapping our line of national security. So now they will take evasive measures. So I will just put this way that based on what's been going on with the state of emergency, we to see where those chips fall afterwards. But I don't believe that the minister and that the prime minister and that the commissioner would have called for this unless they had some intelligence that we don't have, and that is would have been very detrimental to the security of our country. The fact that they are issuing preventive detention orders for certain individuals on an ongoing basis clues me in that they have certain intel that made it vital to grab these persons and to operate in this manner. And it shows even more in that it's not being used, they're targeted strikes right now. It's not being used to, let's just say, for example, there's no curfew. That's a good sign. That means
Yes.
that the Prime Minister is not trying to or not willing to restrict the movement of law-abiding citizens. That there's a certain purpose for this. It's not a general state emergency. So it is being used as a tool right now to basically give us a long-term result for national security. Maybe even to put certain systems in place to deal with it as soon as it raises, to be able to handle whatever fallout is going to come. Because there will always be a small fallout afterwards when certain people go back out. There will be, people want to also, in terms of the gang relations, make their money. There'll be a vacuum for territory or so. And I do believe that the TTPS and the ministry is more than capable and competent in terms of being able to handle those things. We just have to see what they do next with it.
All right, I just want to go through some of the comments that we have on the chat, and there are quite a few, some very lengthy comments, so just bear with me. I firmly believe that our crime problem has a lot to do with the constitution of the police service. What I mean by this is that I am convinced that the TTPS is a corrupt entity, right? Apart from the gross incompetence within the ranking officers. Paul, feel free to comment.
All right. So there's an important thing that we have to note with law enforcement. Law enforcement, if there's not trust between law enforcement and citizenry, it's going to be more difficult to get intel. It's going to have a negative perception. There's going to be aggression towards law enforcement officers. And a lot of times that's met with aggression back. There's de-escalation training. I think a lot of officers need to go back to their basic use of force. But I digress with that. What we need to do is in the police service, not really hearts and minds units of TTPS. They've been doing great work, community policing. I could name certain officers. I wouldn't because there's too many of them to name. They're doing great work with citizens, but it just takes one bad officer to cause the work of 100 to fall down. And I think a lot more emphasis can be placed and should be placed in terms of not just weeding out the corrupt officers, not just weeding out the bad officers, but also in terms of the recruitment process needs to be looked at again, the training process needs to be reviewed. We need to take a hard audit and a hard review in those programs to see what is producing this problem in the system. We have to identify the problem. So arresting rogue officers, great. Prosecuting, great. We need to do that, but we need to identify the defect that is causing this volume of that to happen. I'll also put it this way, and something I do want to touch on. And I'll give just a very small experience. I went to renew my firearm license the other day in the police station. And because they didn't reprint books, they're using old books, you have to fill out multiple receipts. It's a lot of writing. So a senior officer was showing a junior officer how to do it with me. I said, well, good. Teaching experience, right? Showing the officer how to do it. She finished up the receipts, everything is good. Double check, make sure everything is fine. When she said, all right, now back to policing work. He stopped and said, hold on. No. This is policing work as well. All of this is policing work. And I was very glad he said that. And I was glad to see that level of guidance too with certain senior officers, senior SDOs, whereby people have to understand, as well as police have to understand, all work of the police officer, all duties, all community relations, that is police work. Getting a call about a noise complaint and responding, that is police work. If paperwork in the station too, that is police work, serving the community in that way. Even stopping, you see a car inside the road and officers do it, stopping, hey, everything all right over there? That is policing work. We have kind of had a weird thing in Trinidad where we think that policing work is, all right, I'll do policing work. I'm going to stop a murder. I'm going to catch a robber. I'm going to do that. Hey, a man call is a pipe in the yard. Hey, that's policing work. And I'm not saying police don't respond to it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, in terms of how serious we have to view it, is that the man running through your yard. Well, yeah, I just see a man run through my yard. He leave your yard? Yeah, he leave your yard. All right, no problem. No, it's time to get out there because you don't know what that man passed through your yard. You don't know if that man just shot someone and passed through your yard. You don't know if that man is hiding somewhere to break in. These smaller things lead to bigger crimes. The noise complaints you get. Somebody's playing music loudly. Police say, and I talk to your neighbor about that. We ain't get involved. You go down, you talk to your neighbor cuss you. You have a child at home that can't sleep, keeping you up because neighbor playing music. You have an argument with your neighbor, back and forth. Somebody pull out a cutlass. So a noise complaint ends up later down the line as a manslaughter. So all those things in policing to be looked at. We need to start getting these small things right. before and that will lead to better results in the bigger things and better attitude towards the bigger things.
Okay.
I agree with that, what you're saying there, because too many times civilians go into a police station and the first thing they tell you, there's a civilian matter, right? All it
Oh yeah,
takes
yeah.
a little bit of police intervention to de-escalate a situation, but nothing is done because there's a civilian matter,
Well,
right?
the first thing you have
And
to I
go
said the
on, go
first thing
on.
you have to do, sorry to cut you, the first thing you have
No,
to
no
do is when
problem.
somebody comes in a station, if they're distressed, your job as a police officer is to address what's going on. Now, if it is a civil matter, the police need to advise it's a civil matter, but the police officer should always give an ear to the person.
Hmm.
That is part of community building community relations.
Correct. Yeah.
All that is part of building trust between the police and the off and the a person. For example, if you go in and and obviously if you go to a police station, you're upset. I don't think people go into the police station on a pleasant mood or to say hello most of the time, right? And of
Mhm.
course, look at it from their side of the desk. They're dealing with aggravation whole day, they're dealing with aggression whole day.
Mhm.
So you come in, huffing and puffing, you vex something with the neighbor or whatever. All right, the police take listen to you, they give you an ear, hear it out, say, all right, sir, I understand you. I understand you're upset. I get that. Did they do so? No, they didn't do so. They just said that. Okay, well, it is a civil matter. You should probably go to an attorney about it. However, if it ends up as this or that, we are here for you. We're here to support you. Don't hesitate to comment to us. Here's the station number. Make sure and call us if this happens. Other than that, our hands are tied in terms of helping you. It is a civil matter. Versus, nah, that's a civil matter. We don't do that.
Oh, exactly.
Big difference in how you feel about the police interaction when you walk
Yeah.
out.
Hmm. Yeah. So if we could just go back for a second there, I mean, my final question, as it relates to the treaty that was signed, um, from your perspective and from everything we discussed tonight and everything that came up now, what should the public expect to see next as it relates to this treaty that was signed and the purported benefits of it?
Well, in terms of immediately what the public may see is that they may see, or they may not, is to tell you the truth, additional US assets or resources being given to Trinidad in terms of infrastructure, in terms of even persons coming down here to help train. You wouldn't see the troops really because
Hmm.
they would be more isolated when they come to assist. So that might be more ice. You might see less movement of that. But you may see assets, you will get what we will get is we will get more busts. You'll hear about more drug busts, these type of things, more gangs being broken up. When you start to hear about that, I could expect that to happen. Also too, when you put pressure on these gangs, when you put pressure on them, they get frustrated. They tend to make mistakes. They tend to make bad decisions. They tend to, or in some cases, if their money isn't running how they want it to run, they may take more risky routes. They're going to expose themselves more. So you're going to see, I think, a reduction in crime long term. Short
Mhm.
term, you're going to see more, more, uh, more busts in terms of cocaine, in terms of illegal firearms, and so. And you know what? If we have a high presence and you see that reducing, it means that that party mission is just about accomplished. We need to stay vigilant after. But if you see
Hmm.
a high presence, high asset deployment, and low yield from it, it means that the criminality has been reduced. It means that either diverted or abandoned, but either way, it's a win for us.
Yeah. Lisha?
Yes, I do want to well look at some of the strategies that are being employed by the government, right? One of the things I would have mentioned in my intro is that you're now seeing a shift towards intelligence-led policing and restructuring of the national security system. For example, we do have a Ministry of Homeland Security and a Ministry of Defense now. Before we would have just had the Ministry of National Security. So, Paul, I don't know if you could maybe comment for us on how significant is this shift, and do you think that it is really going to make a difference on the ground in terms of reducing crime?
So I think it was a very good decision. It was something that I don't know, was discussed a lot before election, and our prime minister she had the foresight and she had the wisdom to actually execute this, and he will, more than anything, he will to execute it. I think it was a great thing to do because breaking it into those two entities, first of all, we're dealing with the administration. There's a huge administrative burden on one ministry, one minister, one PS. It was not conducive to having to a national security system to run the military and the policing agencies and the fire and prisons and all these different agencies, immigration, all under one umbrella. It was too much of a burden for one ministry. So splitting it helped us split that burden and give more focus on what a minister, what the PS should be focusing on, what these administrators should be focusing on. So it was a very good move to split it. And once the communication is there, and once that cooperative approach is there, and they'll be in sync. And it's also too, if you've noticed, I believe the Minister of Defense is also Junior Minister of Homeland Security as well. So there's
Yes,
that
that's correct.
interconnectivity between the ministries as well. I believe they still, if I'm not mistaken, they still occupy the same space in Temple Court in Port of Spain. You know, I think it was more of an administrative exercise to ease that burden, which should lead to more productivity. And more productivity in the national security apparatus is a benefit to the people.
I think you explained that so well, so clear and so well. And I really hope, because people have a tendency, I don't know if it's just resistance to change, if it's all about, political fighting. We have two opposing parties, one must oppose the other, right? Whatever the other one does, the other one opposes. But you see, some of these decisions that are being made and some of these strategies that are being put forward, there's some sound reasoning behind it. And I don't know if people really, they sit down, they think, they listen to the opinions of the experts and so on. But I mean, Paul, you explained that so well, just in terms of the administrative overhead that one ministry had to handle, that now has been split. So it's divided into two. So it will allow for the more efficient operations of the ministries, so simple common sense. Right. So time check now. It is 9:01. I'm not seeing any questions on the chat, like new questions on the chat. There are some questions that are being asked, but I don't think Paul is the one to answer those questions that pertain to immigration and fire, the distribution of firearms licensing and so on, right? I think that is really not in Paul's what's
Well,
the word? Not his purview.
my company actually does all the related support work for it in terms of applications, medicals, legal work. We do that, but in terms
Okay.
of the firearm stuff, I know it has been. I just want to point out that they're trying to. It's a political thing as well, trying to link it to the stand your ground legislation. And the stand your ground legislation is anti-home invasion and self-protection legislation, which is very, very important. It includes if you have a firearm or not, but there's been no legislative changes to the Firearm Act, which I am hoping will come soon in terms of modernizing it. However, the stand your ground law, I see someone is asking to
Yes.
explain it, and I would take an entire 2 hours if I was to explain the entire act, but I'll say it very in short that long, long overdue, and credit to this government, to the Prime Minister, to the Attorney General, and all those who and to the Junior Attorney General as well, the Minister, the Minister Attorney General. Credit to all of them. They have really pushed forward that. They got it out. And what that means is that you can defend yourself in your home with a lot less burden of having to show that you were in such immediate danger that you had to defend yourself. Now you have to prove it still. You have to show you act in defense, but there's no duty to retreat inside of your own house. It puts a huge offense, a massive fine on anybody who is to break into your house. It puts the onus and the difficulty on the criminal rather than the citizen, which was how it was previously, or the law-abiding citizen, I should say. That's it in a nutshell.
All
Well,
right. So
just
I
for
hope,
reference, the person
yes.
who asked that lives in St. Lucia, so he's not too familiar with that, right? I know him,
No problem.
so that is why he asked, just for that clarity, seeing that he lives right up the road, but he probably wasn't too accurate with the purpose here.
This is landmark legislation. This is legislation that is not popular or not has not been pushed in the English legal system. I believe in Canada now
Mhm.
there's a MP who is trying to push exactly what we have down here for people to be able to have the proper legal protection in defending themselves in their own home. So it is very important legislation that, and a credit again to the Prime Minister, credit again to the Attorney General, credit again to the Minister of Justice, the Minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General, for really pushing this through, because it creates such a heinous, it's such a home invasion, is such a heinous offense, and all the violent crime that comes with it. It is carrying an adequate penalty right now. It wasn't before.
Yeah, correct, correct. So it not just protects, it also prescribes higher and more serious penalties, for home invasion and stuff like that. So
In
yeah,
line with it, yes. I believe in line with the severity of the offense.
yeah. Well, I'd just like to say to the person from St. Lucia, I see he's asking something again. I'll get the act and send it to him.
Okay. So, well, I have one final question I would like to ask. I was going to stay away from this because to me, this is more of an educational issue as opposed to a crime issue. But we are having this debate that is taking place in the parliament and in the national discourse about police in schools to curb violence that is happening with our school children. Very, very, very unfortunate that we've had to come to that, right? Now, those who are for it, and many parents are for it, the Prime Minister would have put out a message saying that parents are contacting her very concerned that they're going to actually remove the police from the schools and they're scared for their children. So, those who are for it, they are saying the police in schools is improving safety and preventing crime. But then you have the critics, and they're coming up with a number of different arguments saying, it's a culture of fear. We're not really addressing the real causes of the misbehavior, right? Paul, I would like you to weigh in on that. What is your take on the police in these schools?
I would actually like to comment on that. First of all, the situation that we have found ourselves in with our school violence is totally, totally absurd. Totally absurd. And while it is being addressed, I believe, in terms of the social aspects and so, what protection is being offered to children who are not in the gangs, who are not behaving violently? You see, we kind of got conditioned, I believe, politically before to always look at, and we have to study about reforming, and you must look at that. But we tend to ignore the people who are not breaking the law. We tend to ignore the persons who, like, okay, one child is given trouble in school, violently attacking other children or so. Yes, you have to deal with his violent tendencies. Yes, you have to get that child the help. But what about the 39 other people in the class who are just trying to study their work, who will not be bothered by police because they're doing nothing wrong in the schools? So I commend the Honorable Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, our Prime Minister, for taking a serious stand in terms of school security, and for and for pushing this initiative, for fighting as usual against those who want to remove the security for those who are law abiding. So the police in schools, and you see the psychological impact that is being spoken of. It is an issue. However, if you look at a lot of schools in the US, you look at a lot of schools in other countries, even in England, you look at certain schools, there are community officers assigned to the schools. And what I believe
Mhm.
now is this is a learning opportunity for the TTPS to be able to station officers in schools as part of community relations. First thing you need to do is do away with the hard approach in terms of, now, honestly, I don't want a police officer. If I had a choice, I wouldn't have a police officer in police uniform in school. It is kind of a barrier. That uniform becomes a barrier at some point in time. You know, plain clothes or so, actually, a lot of places in the States, while we are still in colonial days, a lot of places in the States now, they are taking officers who have whole sleeve tattoos, beard, everything, and looking like an average Joe. And they're using them as the community officers, those officers who like that, hey, you know, something relatable to people, right? And I think it's a great initiative, and I think there's so much room where it can now be improved and built upon. But to remove it will be going a step backwards, a big step backwards.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm seeing someone, Byron, asking, can compulsory service or conscription be something we should consider in Trinidad to reshape our youths? Any comments on that?
And okay, I have comments on, and as a former cadet, I think cadet force did amazing, for myself and how I grew up in the environment I grew up. I think it helped me a lot with discipline, and it was really invaluable. Some people were in Sea Scouts, others were in different disciplinary programs like that in terms of voluntary ones. Now there's the I believe it's there's my part, my lot. I'm not sure the status of that right now. There are programs that children can go into. Now, personally, and I'm saying this, I don't like to go outside my expertise here, but I'm just saying I'm saying this as a layman, that I do believe when a child goes into school, it should be mandatory that they take part in some extracurricular, whether it be cadets, scouts, football, chess club, something like that to occupy them further. I do believe that that should be, I shouldn't say mandatory really, but it should be strongly encouraged, which is in a lot of schools. And if mandatory, so be it, but I leave that to the education experts.
All right. So, Donnie, do you have any questions? Further questions?
Um, well, I saw someone speak about Louis leasing proposed mandatory service and SAPMARD say no, and that was the end of it. But to put a realistic check on that, um, from my information, what I've personally seen, there are quite a number of Mahasaba run high schools that do have cadets as a extracurricular activity. So I can't say when it started, but it was at least 15 years ago. Um, my nephew would have started, and guys from around the village where I am, I know when they were in school, they were in cadets. So it was at least 15 years ago. So whilst that may have been present, I could definitely say over 15 years ago, the Mahasaba high schools did start cadet training, for the young guys in in the school. So it may not be all that correct, people just have the little tit for tat, you know, but these things change over time, but generally I am okay. I think we exhausted all the questions and Paul was more than
Plan?
adequate in his responses. And you see, that's the thing when you have somebody who's good at the job,
No, but
you
also
know.
Thank you.
I must say, as the manner in which you articulated your points, and if the audience does not see the common sense in what you're saying, well, then I don't know. I don't know what we could do again. I mean, I'm hearing that a lot of the problem, we have a big problem with communication, but to me, I mean, things are like Paul would have communicated things very, very clearly.
Yeah. Mhm.
In a way, I have to say I was impressed with the common sense approach and the clarity in the communication. So I want to
Well, I
thank
mean,
you for that, Paul.
I thank you for having me, and I really try to avoid a lot of technical terms. When people hear me speak, I don't really speak in technical terms because I really believe this to my core that if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it sufficiently.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I was
Very
smiling
correct.
because I saw somebody said, what this conversation reminds them of a strong deja vu, right? Now, I mean, we have to say the national discourse is the same thing, even when I was probably a teenager now entering university. I'm not going to get into how long ago that was. But we've had the same things and we keep talking about the same things. Like food security is a big one, diversifying the economy, all these things we've been talking about for decades over and over. So I do agree with that to a certain extent, securing the borders, etc. Nothing new. But we have to move from talk to solutions. That is where we
And
have to
action.
get to
And action.
action.
Yeah.
Right. Correct. Not just solutions, but actually putting those solutions
Hmm.
into action. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I get the deja vu, I understand, but we also do have to keep the national discourse going. right?
Mhm.
So having said that, it is 9:14. I'm not seeing any additional questions, so I would like to ask Paul now if he has any closing remarks for us.
Um, I just want to say that right now, in our state of national security, we are in a transitional state right now. We have spent the last number of years, I wouldn't say how many exactly, but the last number of years with crime festering, the narco trade being all but encouraged. And we now have a government that's come into place that is hell bent on cutting that narco trade. It's going to have different types of repercussions, but we are in a transitional period of national security. And I believe that everything that is being done is for the betterment of the country in terms of bringing us out of this and into a state where we could actually be stable and a proper island paradise.
Okay, thank you. Donnie, over to you. Closing remarks?
Former and deceased Prime Minister Manning once said that facts are a hard thing to get away from, right? And that is correct. And since April 2025, we would have seen decisions being made and hard decisions that previous leaders did not make. And it is owing to where we are right now as a country and where we stand. And this goes from the economy to national security to agriculture, and it goes through across sectors. I always say, and even in the program that we do with me, to make a cake, you have to break eggs. Always say that. And sometimes and coming out from a period where you would have had increased crime over a long period, sometimes you have to make hard decisions. But in this case, the decisions are being made, but you are seeing the results. Last year, we had the lowest murder rate in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
That is a fact that you cannot dispute. We are seeing major intercepts of drugs on the sea. Even today, there was a narco submarine um, that was intercepted by the Mexican authorities, as Paul and I discussed there. It shows that things are changing up. It is evidence to say that things are definitely changing for as Trump put it, for the narco terrorists. These things, I think, will yield results, and we have to be realistic. We could oppose, but are we opposing our own safety? Are we opposing the development of a country? What are we really opposing, for political sake? So, but at the end of the day, I am more concerned with the facts and the statistics. And throughout sectors, you are seeing the statistics changing for the better. That is undisputed. And that is where I stand. Once we see the positive change, I am happy for it. And if you're a law abiding citizen, you're nothing to worry about. All right. So that will be my closing comment, Lisha. Over to you. And obviously, I would like to thank Paul. Thank you again. This would not be the first time that you're here, Paul. So, we'll definitely see you again.
Well,
Thank you.
Donnie, you took the words out of my mouth. I hope for certain that Paul joins us again. So tonight's
Welcome.
episode has been Let's Talk About National Security. Our panelist was security expert Paul Daniel Nahous, and I have to say it was a very, very good program. Paul, I know I said it many times, but I found you explain things so clearly and so common sensely. And I do hope you join us again. We spoke about many things. We spoke about the Shield of Americas Summit, which out of which was born a regional coalition dealing with transnational crime. We spoke about the state of emergency. We spoke about gang. We spoke about police and schools, and so on, and many other things we would have touched on. So I sincerely want to thank you for coming on the program, for sharing your knowledge, your expertise with us based on the feedback I'm seeing in the chats. Although not many people asked a lot of questions, the chats were certainly busy. So I do want to thank our viewers who would have joined us on social media, on Zoom, members of the media who may have tuned in. Thank you all so much for your interest in the program, your questions, your comments, and do join us again next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. as we bring to you another episode of One on One. Thank you and good night.